It's time to take a look at what's making the front pages here in France. Florence Villeminot joins us. Hello to you, Flo. Let's start with the right-wing paper, Le Figaro. It's focusing on defence spending in France, and this all comes as the French President François Hollande is scheduled to give his New Year's greeting to members of the army.
That's right. This is kind of a French tradition. During the month of January, the president travels around France wishing Happy New Year to all sorts of professions. Today, it's the army, but the army isn't really happy these days. You can read more about it on the front page of Le Figaro. Just before Christmas, military leaders sounded the alarm over the lack of means assigned to defense. And you can see here on the front page of Le Figaro saying this really, defense spending is going to be a major emergency after the presidential election.
Well, the paper is predicting that defence spending could become a major issue during the upcoming presidential election.
That's right, and Le Figaro says it should. Now, keep in mind that the right-wing paper is very much a pro-military paper, so that's where their thinking is. But Le Figaro takes a closer look at defense spending over the past 60 years. Take a look at these balls. You can see them getting smaller and smaller over time. Le Figaro says it's been a free fall. Now, the furthest ball to the left there is 1960. That's when defense spending was 5.79% of GDP. In 2015, it was 1.79% of GDP. So you can see it's dropped 4 points in the past 55 years.
And that's a European trend in general, isn't it?
Absolutely. And Le Figaro says that that's a problem for both France and for Europe, because while both France and Europe are lowering their defense spending, the rest of the world is increasing their defense spending. Now, that goes for our allies, but also our enemies. According to Le Figaro, in the age of rampant terrorist attacks, we're living in Care Bear land. It's time to wake up, says Le Figaro. And Le Figaro says that French people are very much aware of this. French people have understood that security has a price, and it should be the next president's number one priority, according to Le Figaro, no matter what that price is.
Well, speaking of the next president, French papers are continuing to focus on the upcoming presidential election. According to the latest polls, the Conservative candidate, François Fillon, has now dropped in voting intention.
That's right. He's losing his lead over the far-right candidate, Marine Le Pen. That's according to the latest poll in Les Echos. Now, both of them are facing the growing threat of the man in third place, Emmanuel Macron. According to this latest poll, he could actually squeeze his way into the second round of the presidential election. This is the first time a poll has suggested this could happen, but it would be under certain conditions. Some people, for instance, from the center would not be running in this election. Some on the left would be running in this election. It's political fiction for now. And given recent history, it's kind of hard to trust polls. So do take this with a grain of salt. It's interesting to note that this week, Le Parisien, which is one of the most popular newspapers here in France, has decided to take a break when it comes to polls during this election season, because we've seen that recently polls got it wrong on a whole lot of issues.
Certainly one way to save a bit of money. Probably quite sensible, one might argue. Well, let's stay with Le Parisien. They're focusing on a young man now who's setting off on a trip around the world, and for the next 3 months, his challenge will be to only eat products that are past their sell-by date.
That's right. It's going to be a tough trip for this young man, 28-year-old Baptiste du Bancher. Now, he's going to travel for 10 months, over 10,000 kilometers, only by bike and by paddle boat, Pirello, and he's only going to eat food that's past its expiration date. Now, why in the world would he do this? Well, he wants to raise awareness about food waste. He says this is the dark side of the global food industry. For instance, this article interviews him, and he says, today you have 870 million people that are suffering from malnourishment, while between 1/3 and a half of total food production is wasted. And you can see that little basket there. That actually represents food waste for an average French person during a year. 20 kilos of food, including 7 kilos of food that are still under wrap. So alternatives are possible, according to Baptiste du Bancher. For instance, he says that drying food that's just about to go off could be a way to save it.
Well, speaking of waste, another paper is focusing on just how much it weighs. And this is a paper for teenagers that we rarely mention in the press review.
That's right. This is L'Actu. It's a newspaper, daily newspaper for people 14 years old and up. And it's really interesting. They focus on interesting little tidbits of information. This is today's issue. You can see they're focusing on the impact of man on our environment in terms of weight. Ever since man appeared on Earth has become 30 trillion tons heavier. Human activity is leaving more and more scars. According to L'actu, we've changed the geology of Earth. Now, this is both construction, you can see it in this cartoon here, where it's saying that mankind is crushing the Earth with its construction, but also its waste. You can see that landfill there. It's pretty incredible. 30 trillion tons, it kind of gives you a headache just to think about it.
It does indeed. Well, let's end with something lighter, both lighter than 30 tons and lighter in context. Today is the Epiphany, and it's a day when French people eat a special cake called king cake.
That's right, galette des rois. It's a wonderful French tradition, a delicious French tradition, it must be said. It's a cake that's stuffed with almond frangipane that you eat to mark Epiphany, so the day when the three kings arrived in Bethlehem. Now, in each cake, there's a porcelain charm or trinket called a fève. It's thought to bring luck and prosperity to whoever finds it in their slice. And if you get the fève, well, you get to be king or queen for the day, and you get to wear a little crown. I bought a little crown here to show you. Now, everyone wants to be king or queen, and Slate takes a look at the probability of you actually becoming king or queen, because it's kind of like playing the lottery, right? It's a very nerdy article, I must say. There are a whole lot of calculations. It's pretty fascinating. If you like statistics and probability, essentially you have a 75% chance of not being king or queen. But I think we should buck that trend. I brought you a crown and me a crown, and I think we should just say we're going to be king.
We're both going to be king and queen for the day. I think your probability is greatly increased if you eat the entire cake yourself.
That's right, or if you eat several cakes throughout the day.
Then you can be multiple kings and queens. What a marvellous idea. Thank you very much for that. Queen Florence Villeminot
Queen Holland.
with the French Press Review.